keys to my apartment? Why not my whole soul while we're at it? Maybe I should just have my paycheck direct deposited to you out of respect for family values. My son said after I was left homeless by the fire. I used to think disasters gave you at least a 24-hour grace period before folks bared their worst selves. Turns out all it takes is the scent of smoke still clinging to your hair. 3 weeks ago, my little bungalow on Edison Street went up like dry kindling at a church bonfire. Faulty wiring, they said, though I swear I heard that old house sigh with relief as the flames peeled back half a century of memories. I'm Dorothy Dot Jefferson, 71 retired cafeteria manager, widow of one bluesman, and mother of one high-earning son who once promised to keep me safe and shining. Safe lasted 48 hours. Shining didn't survive the first insurance call. The morning after the fire, I stood barefoot in the Red Cross motel room, thin towel, thinner walls, trying not to notice the ash-colored footprint I'd left on the cheap carpet. My phone buzzed. "Breakfast at 9, Ma? Need to talk." That was Damien, my only child. Finance consultant out in Buckhead, blessing Instagram with pictures of leather seats and lavender lattes. I texted, "Be right there," and wiped a tear I blamed on smoke. Damien picked the kind of brunch spot where waffles cost more than my weekly grocery budget, but insurance paperwork had me too numb to argue. He hugged me quick, suit still scented of designer cologne, then launched straight into logistics. Adjuster timelines, salvage companies, rental shortages. I nodded, clutching complimentary coffee like communion. When the check came, he slid his Amex across the table with a sigh heavy as buttered grits. "Hotels fine short-term, Ma, but long-term you'll need a plan." "I was hoping that plan might be your guest room," I said, voice small in all that marble echo. He froze, card halfway to the waiter. "You mean move in?" "Just till the house is rebuilt," I answered. My palms tingled. Never liked asking for favors, even from flesh. Damien's eyes darted to the waiter, back to me. He lowered his tone. "Ma, boundaries matter. I can pay for an extended stay downtown. Keys to my condo, that's practically adopting a roommate at $70 per square foot." Heat rose up my neck. "You'd rather wire rent to a stranger than roll out a quilt for your mother?" He chuckled, but it landed sharp. "Keys to the condo? Why not hand you my soul? Maybe I should set up direct deposit of my paycheck, out of respect for family values." The word slapped harder than any flame. I stared at the syrup trail on my plate, feeling lighter than ash and heavy as grief all at once. I didn't yell. I'd learned young that anger burns the wrong house down. I folded my napkin, rose from the table. "Ma, wait, don't be dramatic," he called. I kissed his cheek, smoke against cologne, and walked out, leaving the smell of cinnamon waffles behind. Outside, Atlanta sunlight hit like interrogation. I thumbed through contacts until I reached one labeled Lady Sax. That's what the jazz scene still calls Beatrice B. Watkins, my best friend since we sang background for Jasper's blues band back in '75. She answered on the second ring, sax riffs drifting through the line. "Dot, sugar, you sound scorched." I told her everything, the fire, the motel, Damien's condo gate. B let out a whistle that could rust a trumpet. "Girl, you come to my duplex out in College Park. We'll stack mattresses if we must." "I can't intrude." "Shush. Besides, I'm on sabbatical from jazz club gigs. Sax needs new lungs. You need new walls. We'll start fresh together." By dusk, I'd checked out of the Red Cross room, clutching a plastic bag of smoke-tinged clothes. B greeted me in pajama pants and a shower cap, arms wide. Her spare room was storage for sheet music and tax receipts, but the couch unfolded fine. As she brewed chamomile, I confessed the line that haunted me. Maybe I should set up direct deposit of my paycheck. B slammed the kettle down. Respect for family values? Let's see if he respects a court summons. I frowned. He didn't break a law, B. Maybe not, but he broke covenant, and Jasper's life insurance trust got clauses you never cashed in. I'd forgotten. Jasper purchased a small policy before cancer stole his final note, naming me sole trustee over a tidy sum meant for permanent housing and creative ventures benefiting Dot. His lawyer, Mr. Alvarez, had mailed documents yearly, which I tucked untouched into a filing cabinet. B's eyes danced. Girl, you rebuild that house into a community arts haven, and you do it without begging a son for keys. The idea sparked like ember in dry pine, but first, I needed quiet. B handed over her sacks. Gold lacquer worn at the bell. Blow out the soot. I pursed lips to mouthpiece, breath quivered, then steadied. The note wobbled. Found tone. B clapped off beat. As night deepened, a plan took shape. Reclaim Jasper's insurance, purchase a vacant lot beside the charred bungalow, and raise a soul firehouse. Half recording studio, half refuge for folks displaced by disaster. Damien's refusal would fund a vision bigger than pity. Before bed, I texted my son one line, "Thank you for breakfast, I'll handle my own keys." 3 dots bubbled, then vanished. Silence said everything. I slept atop B's couch, sacks within reach, dreaming of hammers, brass melodies, and a front door lock only gratitude could open. I woke the next morning long before sunrise, jolted from a dream of timber crackling. No fire this time, only the low hum of B's refrigerator and dawn traffic far off on Old National Highway. I lay there on her fold-out couch, inhaling the faint smell of reed pads and valve oil that clung to her saxophone. The world was intact, if a little smoky inside my head. By 7 a.m., B had coffee brewing thick as motor oil and the local Channel 11 anchors chirping about traffic, heat, and one miracle survivor of the Edison Street blaze. The segment showed me wrapped in a Red Cross blanket, hair singed, eyes shell-shocked. B muted the volume. "City's already telling your story," she said, sliding a mug across the counter. "Only question now is who finishes the script, you or them?" Step 1 was paperwork. We drove to Mr. Alvarez's one-story office, the same lawyer who'd notarized Jasper's life insurance policy in 1996. The waiting room AC rattled like dice in a cup. I handed over a smoke-stained folder. The policy, Jasper's will, and the creative venture clause he'd joked about when cancer first forced him off the bandstand. Alvarez flipped pages, eyebrows climbing. "Face value $150 cash," he said, tapping a calculator. "Invested conservatively, that's roughly $240,000 today, and it's all liquid." My pulse drummed. B squeezed my shoulder hard enough to leave crescents, but money is just promise without a plan, so we made one. Redemption by rebuild. Soul Firehouse. Half commercial kitchen, half rehearsal studio, open to any Atlantan displaced by disaster or dreaming of a chorus they couldn't afford. Jasper's piano, rescued and refinished, would anchor the studio. Solar panels would top the roof. Every feature would be paid in cash. No strings, no mortgages, no keys begged from anybody's guilt. B, ever the brass evangelist, suggested we crowdsource labor the same way we'd once passed a hat in smoky bars. "We'll hold a rebuild rally," she said. "You bring the backstory. I'll bring the big horn." That night, she filmed a 30-second TikTok, me standing on the charred slab in a borrowed hard hat, blowing a shaky blues scale on her gold lacquer tenor. The caption read, "Soul Firehouse. Turn ashes into anthem." Volunteers Saturday. We posted at midnight, half expecting silence. By sunrise, the clip had 48,000 views. Comments poured in. "I can donate lumber. My union does pro bono electrical." My goat loves kudzu. Need a living lawnmower? B grinned, scrolling. Well, look at that. World still loves a comeback. I spent Thursday and Friday on the phone. Permits, dumpsters, porta potties, a ragtag architect named Jules who loved the phrase community acoustics. B called her sax students and promised free lessons in exchange for swinging hammers. Alvarez wrangled zoning waivers like it was domino night. Saturday broke hot and bright. By 8 o'clock, the empty lot buzzed with pickup trucks. A pair of GSU architecture majors set up laser levels. Firemen in off-duty t-shirts heaved debris into the roll-off. A food truck chef named Peach backed onto the curb blasting Bill Withers and handed out peach barbecue sliders. Somebody's uncle hauled in a concrete mixer. And yes, the promised goat trotted around the overgrown edges, chewing kudzu like popcorn. I walked through the chaos, passing out gloves from a cardboard box that smelled faintly of smoke. Thank you. Started to feel too small for what people were offering. Sweat, skill, borrowed tools, $5 bills folded twice. At 11, the first wall of the future kitchen stood knee-high, cinder blocks straight as piano keys. That's when a silver Mercedes eased up to the barricade. Damien climbed out, wearing pristine Jordans and an athleisure hoodie, advertising a gym he probably never sweated in. His gaze swept across the goat, the block wall, the teen live streamers filming everything. I wiped grit on my jeans and walked over. Morning, son. He sniffed at the smoky air. Mom, I saw your TikTok. Thought you were kidding. His eyes slid to the half-built wall. You're really doing this? Already doing, I corrected, stepping aside so he could watch a volunteer drill rebar. Behind us, B riffed a brassy line that set the crowd clapping on off beats. Damien fidgeted, voice dropping. Look, if I wired some money, would that help? His tone was half apology, half negotiation. I almost laughed. Jasper's ghost surely did. Money's welcome, I said, but I need hands more than wires. I held out a pair of gloves. Heavy canvas speckled with mortar dust, size large ought to fit. For a heartbeat he hesitated, boardroom reflex fighting something older, then he took them, tugged each finger snug, walked toward the pallet of blocks. A teenage volunteer, hands tattooed with fresh Sharpie hearts, showed him how to butter mortar. Damien mimicked the motion, cheeks reddening in real heat for once. When the goat tugged at his shoelace, he actually laughed, high and surprised. By sundown, the outer kitchen wall stood waist-high. Someone strung fairy lights on the cyclone fence. B's sax crooned against a DJ's beat loop, and the neighborhood kids chanted, "Sol, fi, re, sol, fi, re." Damien slumped beside me on a stack of unused blocks, sweat carving clean lines through mortar dust on his face. Mom, he swallowed hard. About what I said at brunch, the paycheck joke. I raised a hand. Grief hears only knives. Today I heard hammers. I nudged his shoulder. Come back tomorrow. Roof joists arrive at 8. He nodded, a slow grin spreading like sunrise. That night, back on B's couch, every muscle in my body vibrated, but my spirit felt tuned. I scrolled to a notification. Damien had posted a photo, himself mud-splattered, goat in the background captioned, "Family values hit different when you earn them." Likes piled up faster than mortar dried. I set B's sax on the coffee table, rested my palm on its bell, and whispered, "Phase 1 done." Tomorrow would bring more blocks, more volunteers, and maybe the first city grant inspector. But tonight the smell of fresh mixed concrete replaced the scent of burnt timber in my dreams, and the only keys I needed were the ones waiting on the piano. Jasper left me for the grand opening he always believed I'd play. Sleep after a build day isn't rest. It's concrete curing in your bones. I woke Sunday before the alarm, shoulder muscles humming like the transformer outside B's duplex. Coffee tasted like victory and ibuprofen. By 7 a.m., we were back on Edison Street, sunrise bouncing off the new cinder block shell. A banner, someone spray painted overnight, fluttered on the chain link. Soul Fire Rises. Damien beat me there. He'd traded Jordans for steel toes and was hauling 2x10s off a flatbed with the teenagers. Peach's truck hissed steam behind him, ladling peach cinnamon oatmeal into compostable bowls. Bee warmed up her sax with a sleepy blues scale that drifted across the lot like permission. At 8 sharp, a White City pickup rolled up. Out stepped Mrs. Loretta Caldwell. Permits officer, gray bun, clipboard, reflective vest, expression that said she'd seen every unlicensed deck in Atlanta. Volunteers whispered like students when the principal walks in. Caldwell circled our wall, nodding at plumb lines, squinting at anchor bolts. I followed. Heart rattling, she tapped a bolt with her pen. Building this close to the sidewalk requires a variance. My stomach nodded. I'd misread the setback diagram. Damien appeared beside me, breathing heavy from lumber duty. "We can adjust, ma'am. Slide the wall back 4 inches." Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "Slide a concrete wall?" Damien wiped sweat. Jacksaw, impact driver, half a day tops. Caldwell considered our crowd, students, retirees, a goat now chewing permit tape. She exhaled. "Show me stamped engineering for that roof." B shuffled through a milk crate and handed over Jules's drawings. Caldwell scanned, lips pursed, then signed a green tag. "Variance pending, but proceed. I like your community benefit clause." She pointed her pen at me. "Environmental health will inspect the kitchen before drywall. Keep those drains covered." She climbed back into the pickup. Volunteers erupted in whoops. I leaned on B, knees soft, goat bleated approval. Mid-morning, Damien's work phone buzzed nonstop. I caught fragments. "Q3 deliverables. Thought you were in Buckhead. Yes." On a construction site. His firm's partners had discovered their star consultant was mixing mortar instead of sales decks. By noon, a sleek sedan arrived carrying Kyle Barton, Damien's direct supervisor, polo shirt, boat shoes, sunburn potential. He stepped gingerly over extension cords, staring. "Damien, the regional VP is asking why you missed Sunday prep," Kyle said. Damien gestured to the half-framed roof. "I'm realigning personal KPIs." Kyle blinked. "Excuse me?" I stepped forward. "He's helping rebuild transitional housing. Good PR if you're smart." Kyle looked from me to the teen live streamer whose phone was aimed directly at him. "Company policy prohibits, unscheduled appearances." B blew a playful baritone note behind him. Kyle's face reddened. "Our clients expect full commitment." Damien crossed his arms, speckled gloves dirty. "Clients appreciate humanity. If they don't, maybe we're consulting the wrong ones." A cheer rose from the volunteers. Phones caught every syllable. Kyle retreated toward his sedan, mumbling about HR. Damien exhaled like he'd bench-pressed a mountain. B puffed a triumphant shrill. Peach handed him an oatmeal bowl on the house. By late afternoon, roof trusses tilted skyward like steeples. Caldwell's reinspection loomed Monday, but morale sailed. That's when I spotted a familiar SUV idling at the curb. My insurance adjuster, Mr. Benson, clipboard of another sort. He'd been dragging heels on my claim, citing investigative delays. Now he eyed the bustling sight. I walked over, heart drumming new rhythms. "Mrs. Jefferson," he said, "I understand rebuilding is therapeutic, but the claim hasn't cleared. Technically, you're constructing on a total loss property still under review." My pulse stuttered. If funding froze, lumber would dry rot. B joined us, sack slung like a rifle. Therapeutic. Sir, this is federal grant compliant reconstruction. Damien appeared. Phone recording. Benson fidgeted. I took a breath. Your company requested receipts. Here are pledges, donations, and engineer approvals. I handed him a folder Alvarez prepped. Damien added, this project will save the insurer rehousing costs. PR gold. Livestream hearts floated across teen screens. Benson scanned documents, lips moving silently. I saw the calculation behind his eyes. Fight the viral widow or writer hashtag, he cleared his throat. Provisional release of funds will be expedited. B hit a celebratory high F twilight, settled in lavender layers when the last truss found its perch. Volunteers gathered for the closing note. I climbed the scaffold, B's sax in hand, breath shaky. Fire destroyed my house, I called, voice echoing off fresh plywood, but it forged a kiln for community. We are the bricks. I raised the horn, let Jasper's favorite 12-bar roll out over nail guns cooling in the dusk. Goat bleated on beat. Peach clicked her tongs like cymbals. Damien swayed beside the teen's head bowed. When the riff ended, I pressed the mouthpiece to my heart. Tomorrow we pour subfloor. Next month 1,000 displaced neighbors will sit at our tables. Soulfire cooks for anybody whose life went up in smoke. Phones flashed like fireflies. As people dispersed, Damien stayed behind stacking tools. He glanced at the crimson sky. Ma, I tendered notice by email. I'm full-time here until we open. Warmth spread through my chest. Keys to the condo? I teased. He grinned. Keys to my schedule, my savings, and, if the board agrees, my bonus. He flipped a contractor's clipboard to show a single line. Donation pledge, 50% quarterly commission to Soulfire House. I laughed, smoke finally leaving my lungs. A paycheck wired out of respect for family values, I said, echoing his old jab. He nodded. From ashes to assets. We locked elbows, watching the half-built roof silhouette against the rising moon, a skeleton already singing with the promise of brass, bread, and bedrooms. I learned 2 truths the week before final inspection. Drywall dust can sneak into places even grief couldn't reach. Nothing rattles a city bureaucrat like a misplaced saxophone riff. Monday broke humid, the kind of Atlanta morning that melts mascara before you've opened the door. B and I arrived at Soulfire House to find Damien already on the roof, strapping solar rails, shirt plastered to his back, steel toes dangling off plywood like he'd been born a carpenter. Inside, volunteers sanded drywall seams while Peach simmered collared queso for breakfast tacos. The place smelled of gypsum and holy ambition. At 10 a.m., sharp, an unmarked sedan nosed up to the curb. Out stepped Mr. Aldous Brinkley, senior inspector from Department of Buildings, 5'6" of pressed khakis and unpressed patience. His reputation for shuttering community projects that don't sing code compliance preceded him like a minor plague. The clipboard under his arm looked heavy enough to hammer nails. He paused at the entry, grimacing at a saxophone stand leaning against the new hostess podium. Musical equipment in a construction zone. B, tuning up beside the stand, flashed her most innocent grin. Morning, sir. Purely motivational. She squeaked a quick interval just to prove it. Brinkley's eyebrow twitched like a seismograph. Let's keep motivation below 85 decibels while I inspect. I offered a hard hat. He declined. I'll rely on awareness, he sniffed, stepping inside. Sheetrockers fell silent. Even Peach killed the griddle sizzle. Brinkley moved room to room, measuring distances, checking outlets with a neon tester that beeped like a heart monitor. Each beep felt personal. When he reached the kitchen, he froze, spotting Jasper's baby Grand, now fully restored, wheels locked beneath a stainless steel hood vent. His pen hovered. A piano in a commercial kitchen violates sanitary code subsection K. My pulse spiked. It's on a sealed platform with removable vinyl wrap, sir. Dual-use cultural space exemption section 142977. Alvarez had drilled that line into me like a gospel hook, Brinkley muttered, consulting his tablet. The neon tester clacked against the piano's lid. He frowned. Loophole confirmed. Very well, but plumbing rough-in diagrams? They'd been printed, stamped, and, thanks to drywall chaos, misplaced. My stomach dropped. Bee's sax echoed faintly from the lobby. She'd launched into a blues vamp to drown our panic. Brinkley's jaw locked. I requested silence. Sir, I stammered, diagrams are in the office trailer. Give me 1 minute. I sprinted outside, heart pounding louder than Bee's solo. In the lot, Relief waited in steel. Terrell, owner of Good Hands Plumbing Supply, backing his delivery truck. Bee had bartered this. A 1-hour sidewalk show at his kid's middle school in exchange for every piece of copper, PVC, and faucet we still lacked. He handed me a roll of plans with a wink. Tell the inspector these lines purr. I dashed back just as Bee's final note, a high F that could peel paint, rang through the hallway. Brinkley stepped from the pantry, temples throbbing. Madam, I will cite noise interference. I unfurled the diagrams like surrender flags. Plumbing, as requested. He snatched them, scanning. Terrell entered behind me, carrying a brass pre-rinse sprayer the size of a toddler. Delivery, he called. Brinkley eyed the logo on Terrell's shirt. Good Hands was city-approved. His clipboard pen hesitated and ticked a box. 30 minutes later, inspection wrapped. Brinkley signed a pink slip, provisional pass pending decibel mitigation, and shoved it into my palm. Grand opening is your risk. Keep the jazz outside. He stalked off, Bee riffing a quiet victory lick the moment his sedan disappeared. I exhaled so hard my N95 mask fluttered. Damien swung down from the roof, flashing a thumbs up. Solar's live. Grid buyback kicks in tomorrow. Peach whooped, ladling collared queso onto fresh tortillas. Someone cranked a Bluetooth speaker. Bee launched into Ain't No Stoppin' Us Now, carefully monitoring the decibel app on her phone. It never topped 84. Livestream launch day grand opening arrived like a brass band at sunrise. We strung fairy lights, wiped stainless until it shone, set rows of mismatched chairs facing Jasper's piano. 2 news vans parked across the street. Teens taped neon arrows to guide guests. And Damien set up 3 phones on tripods linking to every platform from Instagram Live to a newly launched TikTok channel, Weird Soul Fire Meals, at 11 a.m. B cut the virtual ribbon with a soaring sax intro. Peach's kitchen crew slid out the first trays of sweet potato beignets. Volunteers handed out iced hibiscus tea. Survivors from last month's apartment fire found seats at the first guest table. I stepped to the mic. 2 months ago, I asked for keys, I began. Cameras zoomed. Today, I hand out plates, sheet music, and a safe night's sleep. Cheers filled the hall, 92 decibels. B winked. We were legal. The livestream counter exploded. 2K, 4K, 10K viewers. Comments scrolled faster than I could read. Bless up, Mama Dot. ATL hearts your hustle. And then a string of shocked emojis from profiles tagged Barton & Co. Consulting, Damien's former firm. Apparently, staff had tuned in expecting disaster. Instead, they saw their ex-analyst running a solar dashboard and teaching kids how kilowatts turn into waffle iron power. 10 minutes later, Damien's phone buzzed. Barton & Co.'s stock ticker, they'd gone public last year, dipped 3%, courtesy of a viral thread praising impact investing done right and clowning Suits, who fired the man making it happen. An influencer with 300K followers tweeted a side-by-side, Damien in mud with Goat vs. Barton execs on a yacht, caption, Guess whose ROI tastes like beignets? Retweets skyrocketed. The dip deepened. Damien showed me the chart. I didn't mean to tank him, he said, though his grin said otherwise. I patted his arm. Sometimes a phoenix rising kicks up ash. B closed the set with an up-tempo shuffle, passing 85 dB by half a notch, just as Brinkley appeared in the doorway. He lifted the decibel meter, eyebrow arched. B caught my eye, tapered into a whispering sub-melody. Meter dropped. Brinkley sighed, then, to my shock, cracked a smile. "Keep it under 90, Miss Watkins." He slipped out before applause erupted. 89 dB legal, jubilant. As night fell, Jasper's piano carried gospel chords while volunteers served gumbo to families who'd lost everything in yesterday's warehouse blaze. Damien handed each guest a reusable key tag. Free meals for a year. B toasted Terrell with sweet tea for the plumbing barter that saved inspection. Outside, the solar array clicked into night mode, feeding surplus power back to the grid. I stepped under the fairy lights, harmonica in pocket, and looked at the glowing windows of Soul Firehouse. No locks yet, just an open door where music and meals flowed like mercy. And somewhere downtown, a hedge fund algorithm tried to understand why goodwill could move markets faster than quarterly forecasts. 12 days after our triumphant opening, Soul Firehouse found itself staring down the kind of night that makes even veteran Southerners eye the clouds and whisper a prayer. Thunderheads as black as piano lacquer stacked over Atlanta, and the radar on Peach's phone seethed purple like a bruise right over Edison Street. We had 40 cots filled with families evacuated from a warehouse blaze only 2 blocks from the last one. Trays of gumbo cooling in steam tables, and crowning it all, the brand new solar array that had become our pride, our power, and half of Damien's redemption arc. B stood in the doorway, sack slung across her chest, squinting at the sky the way a captain sizes up waves she can't outrun. "That storm's packing sideways lightning," she muttered. I felt Jasper's harmonica grow cold in my apron pocket. Metal knows bad weather. We hustled. Damien and 2 teenage volunteers scrambled to shut down the inverters. Colin herded sleepy toddlers away from the windows. Terrell bolted the kitchen hood vents, and I dashed outside to unhook the fairy light strings, rain already needling my face. Then, as if the heavens wanted a front row seat to their own show, the first fork of lightning pierced the sky and landed a direct hit on the vacant lot across the street, splitting the trunk of a kudzu-choked pecan in half and throwing a green-white flash bright enough to silhouette our entire build like a negative photograph. The kinetic smack rolled through my ribs, and in the same instant, every light inside Soulfire blinked out, plunging the house into candle dark except for the faint emergency LEDs by the exits. Peach yelled from the kitchen, "Freezers just died!" And I felt a coil of dread, thousands of dollars of donated produce now ticking towards spoilage. Damien re-emerged, rain streaking his face, and shouted over the wind that the main breaker had tripped before the array could arc, a blessing wrapped in inconvenience. We wouldn't burn, but unless we fired the diesel backup generator, the gumbo, the collards, and 40 frightened guests would face a night of stifling darkness. B raised her sacks like a torch. Generators in the alley, but the keys in the office trailer. Before I could respond, a second crash of lightning answered, and B was already running, 72 years old, plastic poncho snapping, brass gleaming mutinously beneath streetlight flicker. Inside the house chaos brewed, toddlers crying, teens fussing with phone flashlights, elders praying aloud. I corralled everyone into the dining hall and ordered calm, channeling my cafeteria manager days. Count heads, hand out battery lanterns, keep voices low. Somewhere amid the clatter, a tall figure pushed through the doorway. Reverend Isaiah Brooks, pastor of New Destiny Baptist across the tracks, collar wet, eyes sharp. "Heard the breaker pop from the fellowship hall," he said, holding up a weatherproof case containing his church's portable generator. Behind him trailed Sister Luann, New Destiny's legendary Hammond B3 organist. Fingers already flexing like they sensed a keyboard crisis. We hauled Reverend Brooks's unit under the awning, bridged it to the kitchen sub-panel, and blessedly, freezers hummed back to life, but the dining hall still needed light, and more importantly, courage. Luann glanced at B's still vacant stand and asked if there was an instrument in the house that wasn't afraid of thunder. Damien handed her the spare baritone sax B kept for student clinics. Luann hefted it, rolled her wrists, and fired a gospel riff so deep it rumbled the floorboards. At that precise moment, B burst back through the side door, trailer key in hand and rainwater streaming off her poncho. She stopped cold, eyes locking on Luann, and for a breath I feared a territorial brawl. Instead, B grinned, snatched her tenor from its peg, and without a word launched a response line. Higher, sassier, all blue notes, and lightning mimicry. The two women circled the dining hall, trading phrases while storm gusts rattled the windows like extra percussion. Toddlers stopped crying. Teens switched from panic to filming. Grandparents clapped double time, and suddenly the storm outside felt like it belonged to us, a drum section we'd hired to underscore joy. Halfway through the impromptu duel, my phone buzzed, an unfamiliar Manhattan number. Over sax runs and thunder, I caught snippets. "This is Meridian West Global, saw your live stream metrics. Interested in hiring Mr. Damian Jefferson as VP of Sustainable Impact, Relocation. Salary double previous, start in 30 days. I stepped into the pantry, rain tapping tin above, and asked about the catch. The recruiter cleared her throat. Meridian insisted he end all hands-on building commitments to avoid conflicts of interest. In other words, leave Soul Firehouse behind. I thanked her, hung up, pressed my forehead to the cool pantry wall. We'd built this refuge on ashes and stubborn brass. Could I ask my son to turn down his once-in-a-lifetime rebound? B's sax soared into a final gliss. Luann punctuated with a growling pedal tone, and the dining hall erupted. Power flickered back as Damien and Terrell coaxed our diesel generator online. Overhead, LEDs glowed like answered prayers. I cornered Damien near the breaker box, lightning still dancing faintly beyond rain-streaked panes, and relayed the offer. He listened, jaw tightening, then looked out at the packed room where hot gumbo steamed, children twirled beneath fairy lights we'd rehung, and B and Luann laughed shoulder to shoulder. He wiped rain from his lashes and said, "Mom, a paycheck's a roof, but Soul Fire's a neighborhood. I've lived under roofs my whole life. I'm staying where the thunder claps on beat." Outside, the storm began to drift east, leaving only the hush of wet asphalt and the low hum of the generator, and inside Soul Firehouse, the first chords of Jasper's piano rose like dawn, promising that not even sideways lightning could derail a family that finally understood how to build in the dark. 5 months after the lightning night, Soul Firehouse pulsed like a second heartbeat in the middle of Edison Street. Kitchen running 3 meals a day, recording studio booked every evening, and Damien's solar array out-earning the power company's projections by 22%. We thought we'd seen every twist, but summertime in Atlanta like surprise encores. It started the morning Reverend Brooks burst through the front doors, collar skewed and breathless, waving a folded flyer like a holy writ. "City's selling the vacant high school 2 streets over," he panted. "Seal bid auction. Developers want condos. Neighborhood wants something else." Something else echoed loud in my spine. A dormitory for our nightly overflow, classrooms for B's music kids, maybe a full-size auditorium so Luann's Hammond didn't have to fight Friar Sizzle. Only hitch. Sealed bids closed in 48 hours, and the lowest rumor from a condo syndicate was $900,000. Even with Jasper's insurance nest and Damien's donations, we were short by 6 figures. That afternoon, B summoned the core crew. Damien, Peach, Terrell, Luann, and the gaggle of teens who now called Soulfire home base. We sat in the dining hall under a mural the kids had painted of a phoenix wearing headphones. B slapped the flyer on the table. We either let gentrification play lead guitar or we grabbed the mic. Ideas ping-ponged. GoFundMe, too slow. Bank loan, mission drift. Corporate sponsorship, risks another Brinkley-style noise complaint. Then one shy teen, Devonte, 14, whose mother still couch surfed after the warehouse blaze, lifted his hand. Miss Dot, that video of Reverend's sermon hit 500,000 views. Y'all ever heard of a 24-hour donatathon live stream? He explained. Continuous broadcast, music sets, cooking demos, basement poetry. Viewers donate in real time. The teens could code the portal themselves. Damien's eyes lit, finance gears clicking. We'd need a hook, he murmured. B grinned, sacks glinting. How about 50 musicians trading solos without a break? One for each year since Atlanta schools integrated. Call it 50 hours for 50 years. Luann pounded a Hammond chord of agreement. Within 6 hours, the teens had spun a bare-bones website. Damien linked Stripe payments. Peach assembled a midnight brunch menu, and I called every musician Jasper had ever jammed with, including blues legend Titus Railroad Jones, who growled, "For you, Dot. I'll play till strings snap." The only obstacle, bandwidth. Terrell rang a friend at a fiber optic startup. They agreed to drop a temporary line if we let their logo ride shotgun on the stream. Done. Launch night arrived sticky with August heat. Fairy lights webbed the parking lot. Volunteers dragged amps and crock pots into makeshift zones marked blues, trap gospel, spoken word, and soul food cam. At 8 p.m., sharp the teens hit go lave. Viewers trickled, then surged, chat scrolling faster than Peach's ladle. By midnight, Titus tore into a 12-bar and open G, sparks flying off slide. Donations ticked past 100K an hour later. A viral TikTok stitched our feed with footage of condo demolitions captioned, "Save the high school, save the hood." View count exploded. So did trolls predicting we'd fold before dawn. B answered with a blistering sax run that trended sax clapback. At 5 a.m., I brewed a gallon of chicory coffee and checked the total. 312 482 out. My fingers trembled. Damien calculated bid gap left. 588 okay minus pledges rolling in. Still steep. I stepped outside to breathe dawn air and nearly collided with the familiar khaki-clad figure. Inspector Brinkley holding 2 to-go coffees. "I can't stay," he said quickly. "My niece sent me your stream. Said, this is civic engagement. She loved that high school's art wing before it closed." He handed me one coffee, eyes darting like he expected a citation for kindness. City Procurement Code Section 12 allows in-kind infrastructure valuation, he said. Your solar overproduction qualifies as offset credit you can apply to a bid if the building is repurposed for public benefit. He produced a folded form already notarized. Worth about 200 grand. Submit with your packet. Then he hustled to his sedan before I could thank him. I stared at the form, steam curling from the cup like surprise forgiveness. Back inside, Damien updated the running tally. Donations plus solar credit now cut the gap to $256K. Daylight brought fresh acts. an elementary choir, a trap producer sampling goat bleats, B trading fours with a 12-year-old violinist. Mid-afternoon, Peach broadcast a stress bake. Cast iron peach cobbler assembled live while Luan improvised a sugar-sweet gospel vamp. Chat donations spiked every time sugar sizzled. By dusk, we sat at $680 K, hearts pounding, but sealed bids closed at 9 a.m. Next day, we needed a miracle encore. Minutes later, the feed glitched. Viewer count froze, then doubled. Damien's eyes widened. Verified account incoming. Up popped a comment from Log Amplify Records. Railroad Jones taught me slide, dropping $250K matching grant if Dot does one last song on Jasper's harmonica. Chat went feral. B thrust the harp into my shaking hand. I hadn't played live since Jasper's funeral. Luan slid behind the Hammond. Titus tuned his national steel. I drew a breath tasting ash and honey and blew a slow, aching phrase, Jasper's favorite lullaby. Hammond swelled, slide guitar wept, B's tenor rose like promise. Donations poured faster than notes. When the final bend faded, Damien hit refresh. $932,114. We filed the electronic bid at 8:47 a.m., 15 minutes before deadline. Cash balance, solar credit affidavit, letters of intent from Soul Firehouse, New Destiny Baptist, and Good Hands Plumbing Training Program for at-risk youth. Then we collapsed on folding chairs, streaming still lave, viewers dropping digital confetti. 3 days of torturous silence later, a plain email arrived from City Real Estate Disposal Committee. I gathered everyone around Jasper's piano to read, "Your proposal for adaptive reuse of Booker T. Washington High is accepted. Deed transfer pending by the end of quarter. Congratulations on contributing to equitable redevelopment." Screams, tears, cymbal crash of pots. Damien spun me in a sweaty hug. B blew a victory trill that probably triggered Brinkley's meter from miles away. That night, under Edison Street stars, I locked the Soul Fire doors, harmonica warm in my pocket. Tomorrow we'd start drafting floor plans for dorms, studios, and a stage large enough to tame every storm. But for one quiet moment, I let the silence breathe, tasting the truth. Sometimes family isn't the roof over your head. It's the crowd that lifts the roof when a neighborhood needs sky. The deed hadn't even warmed in my purse before the first complication marched through Soul Fire's doors wearing a tailored suit and a grin polished enough to show stock options. Alvin Carter, Regional Director of Poseidon Capital Development, the condo syndicate we just outbid. He found me in the studio, wiping dust off Jasper's baby grand and tipped an invisible hat. "Mrs. Jefferson," he purred, "congratulations on the high school coup. Impressive fundraising." I kept the piano lid between us like a moat. Coup? More like community. Carter's smile thinned. "Poseidon owns the vacant grocery lot adjoining Booker T. We'd planned a mixed-use marvel. Until your live stream turned the city against evil gentrifiers." He clicked a silver pen. "Our investors dislike obstacles. They prefer acquisitions. Sell us the deed, triple your bid price, walk away flush." "Flush can't shelter families," I said. His pen snapped shut. "Sentiment doesn't finance maintenance. That school needs seismic upgrades, ODA ramps, asbestos abatement. One fire inspection failure and the city yanks your permit." He slid a card across the piano. "Call me when compassion runs dry." Then he left, perfume of power swirling in his wake. I gathered the crew in Peach's kitchen, steam fogging the windows. Damien ran numbers. Asbestos removal alone, $180K elevator retrofit, $220K. B exhaled a low F sharp. We didn't come this far to pawn our miracle. Reverend Brooks tapped the table. "If the mountain's big, carve stairs," Luan grinned, "or hire a choir to sing it flat." The next morning, teenagers lugged folding chairs into Booker T. Dusty auditorium, cracked leather seats, stage curtains smelling of chalk and thyme. We lit battery lanterns and walked the halls. Lockers yawned open like tired mouths. Seniors' graffiti still whispered 1994 slang. Colin, clipboard in hand, flagged sections plastered with asbestos notices. Damien video called an old MIT classmate now running a robotic startup. 2 hours later, we had a pilot grant for using student-operated mezzanine drones to map hazardous ceilings. Funding included hazmat training for our teens, steps carved. That night, the board met in the band room under a sagging acoustic tile ceiling. Alvarez called in on speaker, voice warped but urgent. Poseidon just filed an injunction, claims your bid's charitable fraud, says you can't secure renovation financing, therefore city should void the sale. The room fell silent. I pictured Carter's silver pen slicing hope. Damien's jaw clenched. We need a capital stack Poseidon can't question. B lifted her sax, fingers twitching. Time for another solo. I shook my head. Time for equity nobody expects. 3 days later, we hosted a press conference in the high school gym. Bleachers buckled, but the hardwood still shone beneath dust. Reporters clustered around folding tables. Carter lurked in back, sunglasses hiding contempt. I stepped to the mic beside Damien and unveiled the Soulfire Cooperative Share Offering, a state-approved community investment note at $250 per share, capped at 10,000 shares, dividend paid in food hall credits or studio hours. Locals could literally buy a piece of their own school with no outside developer skimming margins. Terrell had secured a CDFI partnership guaranteeing low-interest bridge loans once we sold 30% of the notes. Alvarez handed out prospectuses. Peach passed cinnamon beignets. Cameras flashed. Carter's jaw visibly tightened. The first 24 hours raised $140,000. Hey, Atlanta teachers bought shares. So did Lyft drivers, church ushers, a retired Braves pitcher. Even Brinkley invested 5 shares, leaving a post-it. Consider this noise compliance. By week's end, we hit 65%, unlocking the CDFI loan. Poseidon's injunction lost oxygen. The judge dismissed it as speculative sour grapes. Yet victory bred new tension at home. Amplify Records, who'd matched our live stream, is now dangling a distribution deal for Soulfire's forthcoming compilation album. Tracks recorded in our studio from fire survivors turned musicians. The contract looked generous until B spotted Clause 17, exclusive rights to Soulfire house name for all merchandising. We'd lose control of every t-shirt and poster funding our soup line. Damien argued we could renegotiate. B declared no saxophone ever surrendered its own marquee. The board split 3-3. Deciding vote fell to me. I walked the dim auditorium that night, echo of my footsteps mingling with distant thunder. On stage, Jasper's harmonica lay under a work light. Damien had left it after teaching chords to a refugee teen. I lifted it, blew a single note, listened to the gym rafters answer. The sound carried no trademark, no clause, just breath and brass, decision made. Next morning, I met Amplify's A&R man in Soulfire's kitchen. Peach slapped dough beside us like a metronome. Love the offer, I said, sliding the contract back. But Soulfire isn't a brand to lease, it's a bell to ring. Keep the vinyl rights, drop the merch clause, and add a scholarship fund for displaced teens. Or we press records ourselves with neighborhood money. He laughed at first, realizing too late my poker face was forged in cafeteria lunch lines. Within an hour, he agreed 70-30 split, no name lock, $50 chaos scholarship pool. B tooted a triumphant glissando. Peach drizzled extra honey on the biscuits. The city scheduled a ceremonial key handover for Booker T on Juneteenth. B rehearsed 50 saxophones for an emancipation march from Soulfire to the school, each horn carried by a volunteer who'd swung a hammer or stirred a pot. Damien finished wiring rooftop solar panels shaped like a phoenix. From the sky, they formed the word rise. Carter drove by during installation, watched the feathers glint, and kept rolling. On the morning of the ceremony, clouds parted like theater curtains. Brinkley, now unofficial ally, handed me an oversized key spray-painted gold. "Try not to melt this one with jazz," he joked. Luann fired the Hammond. B's 50-horn choir answered. Kids in hard hats tugged the old doors open, sunlight flooding hallways that had waited decades to be more than silence. I crossed the threshold first. Harmonica warm in my palm, Jasper's song ready on my lips. Behind me rolled thunder. Not from the sky this time, but from hundreds of new owners' footsteps echoing through corridors they now rightfully claimed. We had carved the mountain, sung it flatter, and left room for gardens on the summit. And somewhere Carter's silver pen lay idle, out-inked by 1,000 signatures of people who refused to sell their future when they could own it together. Summer settled over Booker T. Washington High the way vinyl settles on a spinning LP, warm, steady, and full of hidden grooves. The city's brass key now hung inside the old principal's office, and every hallway smelled of fresh primer mixed with August humidity. Construction crews hammered by day. At night, teens in hard hats laid down vocal tracks in the former chemistry lab turned studio, the door labeled "Make Reactions" in bubble letters. But rebirth doesn't wait on punch lists. 2 weeks after the Juneteenth handoff, the first test arrived disguised as a heat wave. Temperatures spiked to 103 gig, and our still primitive HVAC wheezed like a harmonica on its last read. CDFI funds for the new chiller hadn't cleared yet. Meanwhile, 40 seniors from a nearby retirement tower, evacuated when their AC failed, arrived in a city bus looking for refuge. We rolled cots into the band room, aimed box fans at open windows, and prayed the power grid would hold. By dusk, the gym floor shimmered in sauna haze. B paced, checking on oxygen tanks. Damien rigged emergency ducting from Soul Firehouse via borrowed flexible tubing. It gave maybe a 5-degree reprieve. Reverend Brooks wiped his brow. "Miracles come in bagged ice and patience," he said. Still, our guests coughed in the thick air. We needed industrial relief, fast. Enter obstacle-turned-ally Inspector Brinkley. He arrived with a trailer hauled by his own Ford Ranger inside a portable diesel chiller normally reserved for city festivals. "Thought the jazz might need cool heads," he said, eyes twinkling. He waved the permit form. Technically, a temporary event. B led a cheer that registered 87 dB, legal, jubilant. While volunteers hooked flex duct to auditorium windows, Peach improvised hydration, watermelon mint slushies blitzed in food service buckets, Luann switched the Hammond to a cheeky lounge Roomba, coaxing retirees to sway on their walkers. By midnight, the thermometer read a merciful 84 degrees, and the band room echoed with soft snoring accompanied by a blues lullaby. B played at whisper volume. Morning brought good news and a curveball. Good news, CDFI wires landed. HVAC installation could begin. Curveball. A local TV crew outside, led by anchor Celeste Hart, famous for exposés that swing from halo to hammer in a single segment. Her producer said viewers were concerned about code compliance for displaced elders. Brinkley tensed. I smiled and invited them in. Celeste filmed retirees sipping slushies, students mapping asbestos-free zones, B and Luann rehearsing a sax organ duet. She asked pointedly if Soulfire could guarantee safety once heavy demo began. I answered, "Safety's a verb here. Every wall we open gets sealed with opportunity." Unsatisfied, she sought conflict until Peach delivered her a cup of slushy, and Terrell guided her camera operator to the rooftop where solar panels spelled rise. Live footage of the Phoenix array against Atlanta's skyline went viral before the segment ended. Comments praising community engineering better than any condo corp. Poseidon's stock dipped another 2%. That evening, our board gathered to sign the HVAC contract for $120K turnkey. Damien spread pages on a cafeteria table. Before ink dried, the old fire station down the block sent word. Their ladder truck failed inspection. City budget cuts meant 3-month delay. Without a functioning ladder truck, any renovation needing rooftop torch work was prohibited. Our HVAC crew could install air handlers inside, but roof condensers had to wait. B slapped the table, not letting elders sweat 3 more months. Reverend Brooks suggested borrowing a church's cherry picker, too short. Terrell pondered cranes. Luann plunked a dramatic diminished chord and said, "Why not trade music for municipal favors?" The idea grew legs. Organize a one-night benefit concert for Atlanta Firefighters Foundation, raise private funds for expedited repair of the ladder truck, and in return, secure a special use permit for rooftop work under fire marshal supervision. Celeste Hart caught wind on Twitter and offered live coverage. Even Poseidon's PR team pledged a token donation. Optics matter when neighborhoods talk. We transformed Booker T's courtyard into an open-air theater. Extension cord fairy lights, pallets for seating. The Hammond rolled onto a plywood stage flanked by B's brass army. Tickets priced pay. What you can. Our retirees insisted on staffing concessions. "Old hands, no lemonade," one cackled. The night air finally cooled as sunset painted bricks honey gold. The concert opened with Titus Railroad Jones, sliding mournful riffs that ripened into jubilation. A children's choir followed, wearing yellow hard hats, singing an original called Hammer Down Hope. Luann and B brought the house to its feet with a call and response medley, organ roaring like Sunday service, saxophone wailing Friday night blues. Celeste narrated between acts, eyes shimmering, midstream donations pinged across the big screen, numbers climbing. Poseidon's Carter slipped in quietly, wrote a check the size of his conscience, and left before cameras found him. By midnight, we'd raised 156K, enough to lease purchase parts for the ladder truck and sponsor firefighter scholarships besides. The fire chief hugged me in front of the crowd, tears cutting soot streaks on his cheeks. "Roof work starts Monday," he promised. HVAC units landed a week later, craned to the roof under watchful ladder truck lights. When the compressors kicked on, cool air spilled through ducts like first rain after drought. Elders cheered, teens break-danced on freshly mopped linoleum. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived. The National Endowment for the Arts had selected Soul Firehouse and Booker T Preserve for a $750K creative placemaking grant, seeded, Celeste's producer admitted, by that viral courtyard concert. Funds earmarked for auditorium acoustics, artist residencies, and a community radio station. That night, I climbed to the roof, harmonica in pocket, city lights flickering like applause below. B joined me, silent. We stared at the Phoenix panels. Rise glowing under moonlight, lightning, heat, red tape, she said, still rising. I lifted Jasper's harp and played the lullaby soft and slow. Wind carried the notes over cooling tar and newly minted ductwork, down into hallways where seniors slept and kids wrote verses on chalkboards no condo board would erase. And far below in the courtyard shadows, Carter stood alone for a moment, looking up at the glow of the word that had beaten him twice. He tipped that silver pen into his pocket, then walked away, leaving the night to music, cool air, and a neighborhood that had decided to own its sky. 1 year after the lightning storm, 8 months after the Courtyard concert, and 3 weeks after the last scrap of asbestos found its place in a sealed dumpster, the Booker T. Washington Preserve opened every door at once. We called the event the Key Change, a nod to music theory and to the oversized rings of original classroom keys we'd cleaned, labeled, and handed back to the neighborhood. By sunrise, the campus buzzed like festival grounds. The old gym, now a climate-controlled dorm, smelled of cedar bunks and fresh linen. The band room, reborn as Studio Phoenix, hummed with a mixing session led by Devante, who just turned 15 and was already splicing sax tracks into Afro beats. Peach's culinary students plated sweet potato sliders for a food truck row lining the bus loop. Over by the former principal's office, now a co-op credit union, Damien installed a sign that read, "Family values are compound interest." At noon, the city dropped off, an impossible-to-miss congratulation. The recently repaired ladder truck, polished like chrome hope, parked under our solar wings so kids could climb the rig that saved their summer. Inspector Brinkley arrived in plain clothes with his niece, the same one who'd loved the art wing, and laughed when B made her blow a perfect middle G on the alto. Reverend Brooks led a short blessing inside the auditorium, which now held 400 cushioned seats and boasted a ceiling painted with constellations of jazz greats. Light from new LED fixtures picked out Ella, Duke, Nina, Coltrane, and, in one corner, Jasper Jefferson, forever tipping his fedora. Just before the ribbon cutting, Alvin Carter slipped through the crowd. He wore no suit today, only khakis and an expression that looked surprisingly like relief. He caught my eye, offered a small salute, then handed B a donation envelope, corporate logo free, before disappearing into the flow of neighbors. B peeked, grinned, 20 season passes underwritten for senior citizens to any and every event we staged. I stepped to the refurbished stage, harmonica in hand, with B and Luann flanking me. The auditorium stilled. I looked out at retirees once displaced by heat, at students whose first safe bed sat 2 floors above, at firefighters, donors, trolls, turned believers watching via live stream at Damien, standing beside a goat-shaped mascot the kids insisted on naming Equity. "House keys measure shelter," I said, voice carrying under perfect acoustics. "But music keys measure courage. Today we hand out both." I raised Jasper's harp and played the lullaby that had followed us from ashes to lightning, courtrooms to rooftops. The notes bounced off stars on the ceiling and circled back, warmer, fuller, no longer a solo. Halfway through, B answered with a bluesy harmony, Luann stitched Hammond chords beneath, and somewhere in the balcony Titus Jones slid a steel guitar sigh. The room became a chord of all our hours. Mortar and sweat, meetings and potholes, slushies, sirens, and surprise allies. When the final bend faded, Peach wheeled in the biggest sheet cake Atlanta had ever tasted. Icing painted like our solar phoenix, candles spelling rise. Seniors sliced first, teens served second. Reporters abandoned cameras to lick frosting. The air conditioning purred a lullaby of its own, evidence that even oppressive summers could be gentled when a city chose cooperation over condos. Later, near dusk, I wandered the quiet third-floor hallway where lockers still bore faint graffiti ghosts. From an open classroom, I heard Devante teaching younger kids to loop a drum track. Across the courtyard, I spotted Carter again, leaning on the fire truck, chatting with a grandmother he once would have displaced. For the first time, his silver pen hung from his pocket like a tool, not a weapon. I headed to the roof, Harmonica warm against my ribs, solar panels soaked in the last of the day's gold, spelling rise brighter than ever. B joined me, pulling two folding chairs. We sat in silence until cicadas eased into evening tempo. You realize, she said, tracing the skyline, there's no higher floor after a rooftop. Plenty of sky left, I answered, feeling the wind slip between the solar feathers. From below, the auditorium's new PA system carried faint music into the night, a choir rehearsal for next week's homelessness awareness telethon. More fundraising, more building, more stories. The work would never finish, but it would always be home. B lifted her sax mouthpiece to the breeze. I raised the harmonica. Together we played a slow, unhurried blues. No urgency now, just gratitude stretched across a neighborhood that had chosen to own its tomorrow. Notes drifted over Edison Street, down to Soul Firehouse, across Booker T's brick facade, and finally out over Atlanta, where humidity softened them into something borderless. Below, the word rise reflected moonlight like a promise sealed. And I understood at last what Jasper meant when he'd scribbled that clause in the insurance papers. For permanent housing and creative ventures benefiting Dot. Permanent wasn't about walls. It was about music no storm could drown, about roofs rebuilt strong enough for whole communities to climb and see further. I drew one last breath through brass and whispered a silent amen into the night. The city answered with distant horns, train whistles, and the steady hum of a ladder truck on standby, ready, like all of us, for the next fire we'd meet with open doors, cool air, and a soundtrack strong enough to turn ashes into an anthem,